reality, he has a white wife. Now, race declines every night for him. You know, and look, I mean, that's what it's all about. But look, okay, so which way do they get our brightest students? What we need to begin to develop, that's what all these conferences should be back, and keep that in mind. The only reason I go around the country is to begin to develop a black social theory. A black social theory. Now, this is the problem we have. Why we're in all this problem, because one of the things that happened to your generation that didn't happen to me, and to everybody else who's at my age, is when I was growing up, the black community rewarded those people who tried to get an education. Rewarded them. Now we are anti-intellectual, anti-educational, and completely ahistorical. Don't pay any attention to history. So what they do to us is they're our brightest black minds. Look, these are our brightest brothers and sisters. They grab through their social theories. One is toward Marxism. Marxism, that's the danger to all of our black students. That's class theory. Class. Now let's do Marx just like we did Maslow. Let's do it quickly. Marx said basically there are two classes of people. The one he called what? The ruling class, the bourgeoisie. The other he called the what? Proletariat. Proletariat. Two classes. And the relationship to these two classes is the production of what? Means of production. Is the relationship. And the ruling class' sole reason to exist is for profit. Profit. And in order to make more profit, they will have to exploit this group of people. Marx went even further. He said just by time alone, you don't need any intervention. Just time alone means that ultimately the proletariat would have to overthrow the ruling class in order to survive. Because the more profit the ruling class wanted, the more they would want, the more exploitation of the profit. But he said something else. He said that if you had people who understood the science of capital, the science of what he was talking about, Marxism, you could then raise the contradiction, artificially raise the contradiction between them. That's the word, raising the contradictions, about those slogans that the Panthers use and then understand. That you could raise the contradiction between these two groups and induce revolution. See, Marx lived in 1848. And Marx didn't know that this proletariat here was going to things called what? Unions. And guess what unions are for? So you got two damn group of white folks fighting over profit. Okay, now, blacks are not in the ruling class or in the unions, believe it or not. The blacks are what Marx called what? The lumpen proletariat. Now the Panthers, and I'm not just picking on Panthers, many of them are my students who are opted to not stay in the struggle for race and did it for class and ass. But the thing about this here is that even the Panthers start calling us what? Lumpen. The lumpen proletariat. Guess what Marx said about the lumpen proletariat? Marx stated that the lumpen proletariat was not a potential revolutionary force. So even Marx said that. So because they're what? They're not cause of the means of what? Production. So if you admit that we are lumpen proletariat, you cannot say you're a Marxist. Not as a black person, unless you need my professional services. We simply can't do that. We can. I tell you, we know Naeem and I, we got this thing going. I always say, the one contradiction in the black community, and I'm very serious about this. I know stuff I sound funny. I'm very serious about it. Is that we have no contradictions. That's the one contradiction. There are no contradictions in the black community. And that is because, again, the thing I'm talking about, Menticide. Let me move on here. Okay, so that takes care of Marx. Okay, let's talk about Freud just for a minute. See, Freud, I think you all should study Freud. Study Freud, because Freud took the position that there were differences between blacks and whites. And he didn't put no type of value on it. He put the value on the Europeans. Here's what Freud says, and says it clearly, read him clearly. He said that the white race, he was very clear about it. Very clear, the Europeans, he wrote it very clearly. And he wrote all about Africans, that Africans seem to have a different type of personality. He said the Europeans are motivated by two genetically determined irrational drives, namely sexuality and aggression. which he calls the death instinct and the life instinct, and constant battle. And Marx said since these are genetically determined traits, that they have two genetically determined traits, sexuality and aggression, that society had to be developed in order to set certain rules, in order to set certain type of conditions to keep these two natural drives to whites, from spontaneous, doing what? From spontaneous, spontaneous expressing themselves, therefore threatening the life, threatening the species. He wrote that clearly, and that is why if you try to expose black folks to analysis really means, that's what he meant. You have to see. It's only about 4 things you can do to a person in therapy. Just for those of you who want to go on, I hope you do. Because this is fight for the mind. I'm just giving you I know about 4 things you. One thing you can do for blacks in a mental health center, anywhere else, in this room, is that you can leave them alone. I mean, that's the first thing. And men ought to be better left alone. Better leave them alone. Second thing you can do, however, is to do what? Give them support. Give them various support. Give them support in such a way, because what they're doing is needs certain of your professional skill to give them support. The third thing you can do, of course, is you can re-educate. You can re-educate means that their learning patterns, the way they address themselves to their life is inappropriate, and you re-educate. The fourth thing is possibly you might be able to do, and that's where Freudian psychology came in, psychoanalysis. It's completely restructure the personality. Literally give the person a new personality. And so Freud took the position that Europeans would have to be sent through psychoanalysis in order to try to contain these natural drives. Now, right away, you don't have to be no genius to understand that these are natural drives, how difficult it is. So when you see what Harold was talking about is somewhat in error. This is what is so difficult. See, what you are and all of us could fail to believe is there's some inconsistency with white people's theory and their practice. It is really not. It's really not. Now we get to your other one that all you go. Okay, that's Freudian. You can question me in depth. That's Freudian psychology. You learn it well enough and get a PhD in almost any country, in any university in this country. If you learn it well enough. If you learn it well enough. See, the whole process of getting through universities in this country is expended effort. Expended effort. Listen, that's all. And medical school is the easiest. Everybody's raving over Morehouse in medical school. Do you know what a black doctor does? He's a slave. Our black doctors are some of the most dysfunctional people you want to see. They never come out of those clinics. They come into their offices every day and hear 200 women, a gynecologists. Hear 200 sisters looking at them. And believe it or not, they do not treat those illnesses that they scream in. They treat the sister. And you can, I'm just showing you, this is another lesson. I'm off Marxism now. I'm going in to talk to you about medicine. And next time you go to your physician, do this for me. Watch and see, don't they follow this pattern. First, they take you in a little room and you begin to get ready, be prepped by a nurse for the doctor. And you can hear him coming. Literally hear him coming towards you. And the most he spends with anybody is 10 minutes, if that. And as he comes in, he's going through his ritual. How are you? If you knew, why the hell would you be there? I mean, this, that, and this, and that. And all the time touching you and feeling you and, and writing the same prescriptions for you he wrote for the other 5. But let me tell you, what he's doing, he's treating the person. And that's very important. Because there's no way, if you stop to think about it, there's no way anyone, if you see one medical book, that's it. It's impossible to comprehend everything in that one book. But you see, what my point I'm telling you as students, don't let that deter you. If you can think it all, you need 2 things to get through medical school. 2 things. You need the capacity to study and a good memory. The capacity to sit for long periods of time and read garbage and regurgitate it. That's all. That's all medical school. In fact, medical school to me is the easiest school. Psychology, if you really... Let me tell you about psychology. I'm going to go on that you all don't know. Let me just go through some of my experience. One time I walked into a clinic. I did my training at the University of Chicago Medical School. I walked into this room, and brother sitting there, this is over 10 years ago, brother sitting there, hooked up to a machine. I mean, hooked up from the head, like somebody from Mars. Hooked up. And, you know, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and the nurse was sitting there because it was in intensive care. I said, what the hell? You know, but I thought I knew everything about the brain. You know, me and my arrogant self. So I thought I knew everything about the brain, like many of you think you know everything there is to know at 18. So, you know, and so what happened was, this was electrical stimulation of the brain. That's how I stumbled into the electrical stimulation. Just stumbled in there. I'd been reading about it. I knew almost everything about it, but when I saw it, I didn't recognize it. That's my only point. The other thing is that I'm just showing you what psychology is not what you all think it is. It's not giving people in. There's another guy named Osgood at University of Illinois. He becomes very important now. Osgood did a lot of work with computers. But he came up with a theory called grit. They called it grit at the Pentagon. Graduated reciprocal initiative attention reduction. What Osgood has done, he's done it a long time ago, but what he has done, he decided to develop to treat countries like you do a personality, like you do an individual. That treat the entire country like you do an individual. And the Pentagon uses it. What it means is graduated reciprocal initiative. It means what they're doing with Iran right now. What they're doing with Iran right now, it follows Osgood, a psychologist. Develop that. That was a psychologist. Then we have, of course, which I think is probably one of the 5 most dangerous crafters in the world. That's Skinner. Skinner. I never heard what Skinner wrote. And y'all just think he's talking about M&M. He wrote these 8 words, and listen to them carefully, write them down, and look at it every morning. Those are 8 most profound words. See, Skinner wrote that behavior is shaped and maintained by its consequences. Listen carefully. That's why he wrote Beyond Freedom and Dignity. What Beyond Freedom and Dignity was all of these black folks are talking about they want freedom and they want dignity. And if you listen to them carefully, we can give them what they want and still control them. The other was that they would induce blacks to begin to do birth control, become sterilized, by making the consequences money. By saying to black people, if you do this, if you become sterilized at a certain age, we'll give you so much money. We'll give you so much money. Now, don't argue that, because, see, something I think, again, we are led to believe. We have been led to believe, and this is where the Menticide. Menticide is those who got it on the wall around here. And when I walk down the hall, don't identify me. Don't say, hey, Bobby, because I don't want these white folks know that my name's up on that wall that y'all got around here. Menticide is defined as the deliberate and systematic destruction of a group's mind with the ultimate aim, the ultimate objective being the extirpation or the extermination of that group. That's Menticide. This deliberate and systematic destruction of a group's mind. A group's mind with the ultimate objective being the extermination of that group. And so if you begin to look at what Skinner and all of these, and I'm talking to you because most of you are psychologists too, this is what psychology really means. Anytime you see things on TV, psychologists have had something to do with it in terms of advertising. Anytime you see those projections on who's going to win an election, the moment that CBS is 6 o'clock at CBS at the polls closed, psychologists worked out those statistical formulas. See, back in 1925, what's his name, who one of the first behaviorists, who they caught on the top of a desk with a student and fired him. What's his name? Said, give me any student, any child, and I'll make it whatever I want. Watson, who was the first behavior. Watson, when they fired him from the University of Chicago, what Watson did, went and started J. Walker Thompson's advertising agent, a psychologist. He became the largest in the world. You see, I'm saying to you, when you start talking about psychology, it's one thing you might hear this narrow thing here at junior college. It's another thing altogether for whites. It was psychologists who started what is now the CIA. Only it was called then OSS in the Second World War. Before the Second World War, the United States didn't have that type of intelligence arm. I'm just showing you that how much you have to learn. And don't let anybody fool you and just feel you in that it's irrelevant. Because you're talking about people's minds. You're talking about influencing people. In fact, you're talking about determining their very existence. And as Harold said, I say, yes, I do say that. If you control minds, you control behind. I don't care what people say. And so one of the problems we have, so in moving on to this, let me just give you a couple other things that you should look at about this. Now, if we look at a student, or we look at a university, it becomes very clear, Atlanta University, Atlanta Junior College system here, that one of the realities is our condition. And this is where blacks sort of get confused. This is where we get confused. Our true condition. One of our true condition is oppression, exploited, women are exploited, da-da-da-da. No. We are what? Enslaved. Enslaved. And the reason we're enslaved is because all of our life-sustaining institutions are controlled by whites. That's slavery. That's slavery. I will guarantee you, there's nobody in this room can tell me where you turn your water on it, or where you turn your lights off at. I ain't talking about in your house. Because they can turn your lights off without even coming in your house. All of our life-sustaining institutions are controlled by another group. That is slavery. That is slavery. Now, I'm not telling you all of this to depress you. You know what I mean? You know, I'm talking about because you keep hearing this type of stuff, and I believe that we are stronger than other group of people. Well, we have been led to believe that we are super people. We're not super people. We're simply just not utilizing the appropriate methods to address this problem. Most of the time, they get us because we personalize it. We personalize it because we have a white friend. What are you talking about? Whites treat me better than blacks. Why they ripped off my TV last night? We equate ripping off a TV with ripping off your mother. Now, let me give you an example. I was just talking about it, but this might be the first time y'all have heard it, but I was at the Social Workers Convention Friday in Washington. Some of us were here. Some of the students were here, too, from here. And I was pointing out that on the plane, the day before that, a sister had talked to some black students in Chicago, and a student had pointed out that a sister stood up and said, well, you're talking about these black men and black women. What about this? And told me that Kareem Jabbar had divorced his wife and is now living with this 23-year-old white girl. Kareem Jabbar. Y'all know Abdul Kareem Jabbar, the mad militant, kind of. I get Sports Illustrated, this is my Sports Illustrated, 10 pages of Jabbar and this white girl. 10 pages. And this 33-year-old man says that this young girl has taught him more than his parents, more than his teachers, more than his coaches, more than his trainers, all in the space of 2 nights. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, what I'm suggesting here, what I'm suggesting here, that if you look at this, here's some, and I'm clearing up because I want to get into the question now. Here's some things we're going to look at that are threatening. Here's the most threatening thing, yes. Harold got into it about black and Africa. The question becomes, what is a black person? Now, we've been having some deep arguments about this over the country, deep discussions about this around the country, quietly. But one of the problems is, and this is one of the problems, see, back in the 60s, one of my students who was Fred Hampton used to ask me, interrupt my class all the time, because we had these free classes, and called it community university, and he used to say, why are we like we are? Why is history demanding too much of us? That was his famous say, why are black folks like we are? Is history demanding? And I used to tell him, and I'm going back to that now because I've gotten too far from it. It's very simple. We are in a race war. And we're the only ones who don't know it. Not only are we the only ones who don't know it, we're the only ones who don't even know what race we are. Seriously, don't laugh about it. We are in a race war.